New U.S. Census figures released last week show poverty levels rose last year across the United States and dramatically in California. In a moment, a conversation with reporters for New America Media about their ongoing coverage of poverty in the Bay Area and other parts of the state. First, a clip from a video made by youth journalist Sean Shaver about his own sister's struggle with poverty.
I've been living out of my storage since January. Every day I go get some clothes, maybe for a day or two, and I leave and go wherever I can go. I have to call somebody and ask them, can I stay at their house, or maybe make arrangements. But every day I wake up and I don't know where I'm gonna sleep. Sometimes people let me come to their house, sometimes they don't. It's just an everyday struggle. I've been trying to look for a job. I've even been on a couple job interviews. When it comes time to give them my address, it's like, well, I don't really know what address to give them because I'm at this person's house, I'm at that person's house. Like, I never know where I'm gonna be at, so it's hard for me to look for a job in a city if I don't know if I'm gonna be in that city.
Well, joining me now are Sean Shaver, youth journalist with New America Media, and Jacob Simas, reporter also with New America Media. Welcome to both of you to the program. Sean, why did you want to record this story with your sister?
Well, I thought our story needed to be told. It's not too many young people living out of their storage unit that I know, and it's just a lot of people like that out there that are in these deep and extreme situations to where they don't have a place to go. A lot of young people are like that, and I just thought that the story needed to be told.
What were her spirits, not knowing where she was going to spend the day?
She was very depressed a lot of the time. Every time I spoke to her, she would complain about how she didn't deserve this because she had worked hard. She also went to college, SF State, and she figured that this was like beneath her, you know what I mean? And she just felt like she needed an outlet or someone to talk to, basically.
Jacob, how common is this story where people have reached the edge and sort of falling off the cliff, if not off it already?
Well, I mean, if you look at the most recent census figures that came out last week, it's not looking good. And according to the census, more and more people are falling into poverty across California. The numbers as of 2010 showed that 15% of the nation was living in poverty. In California, it's worse. It's about 16%. And in certain parts of California, if you look at some of the rural communities in the Central Valley, counties like Kings County, Fresno County, Tulare, Kern County, some of those figures get above 20%. So it's a bleak picture, and unfortunately more people are slipping below that poverty line. But I think it's important to understand how the Census Bureau measures poverty. They use what's called a federal poverty line, which is for a family of 4, 2 adults and 2 kids, that's $22,000 a year. So think about that for a moment. That poverty level, that's the same number that they use to measure poverty in the Bay Area and in California than they do in Georgia, in Mississippi, in Florida, Ohio. And we know what the cost of living is in California, and we know what the cost of living is in the Bay Area. So in a way, we kind of need to take these numbers with a grain of salt.
How's your sister surviving? I mean, is there support from friends or family, or who? How is she surviving?
A lot of support from friends. She tries to go over her friend's house whenever she can. Family's kind of scarce. They're not distant, you know what I mean? She gets government assistance as well. So I don't.
In terms of food stamps?
Yeah, food stamps. She gets that, and then she also gets like a check, you know, as well. Mm-hmm. But like sometimes she doesn't know, where to get the check at because she doesn't have an actual home. She's living in her storage unit, basically.
And she spends her days just. Tell a little bit about the family situation, because it is different. She's your stepsister?
Yes. Actually, she's my father's child, and my father lives in Arizona, and she's kind of like out here in California on her own, and like he's not really willing to take her in, and I don't really understand that or really know why. And then my mother doesn't really know her well enough to allow her to come to our home.
Okay. What are some of the other situations that cause people to get to this point? I mean, I know that some of the reports indicate that race is a factor, that blacks and Latinos are suffering more than others.
Sure, that's absolutely true. I mean, when you look at the statistics and you break it down by not just geography, but demography, and you look at some of the groups that are impacted, poverty is not hitting all people equally. That much is clear. In fact, when you look at black and brown people, African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, the poverty numbers jump to 27, 28%. Okay, and when you look at things under a microscope and you go into certain communities that really are, for the most part, invisible, those numbers jump even more, which is why our organization thought it was important to try to do some reporting that would put a human face on some of this data. Because if you're living in the Bay Area in particular, a town like San Francisco, it's a wealthy town. And if you're living in a place like San Francisco, most folks are not going to go to Hunters Point, right? If you're living, in the Oakland Hills, you're probably not going to go to West Oakland. If you're living in the greater Bay Area, you're probably not going to go to North Richmond. But these are some of the places with the highest poverty rates where people are really struggling, but they're invisible communities for the most part.
Quickly, how does education play into all of this, or is it a factor, the level of education?
Level of education. I think there's some correlating things that you could point to. I think the question is, how does poverty impact the ability of children to learn? To me, that's the question. And I think you see that as poverty rates increase, academic performance decreases, and I think the statistics would play that out.
We fare a little bit better in the Bay Area. Is that helpful in terms of getting people's attention to pay attention to this problem?
Well, we are faring better in the Bay Area, but again, you have to understand that the cost of living in the Bay Area makes those numbers skewed a bit. And so hopefully stories like the ones that Sean is producing will make people take notice.
So Sean, you plan to do more?
Yeah, I plan to do more stories and get out there.
Okay. Well, my thanks to both of you for joining me here tonight.